we're actually the same. We have the same DNA. 99.99% of our DNA is exactly the same. But there's only a few letters that are changed. And that minute change is actually responsible for all of the uniqueness that everyone on the planet has. So the billions of people on the planet only have very, very slight variations. The challenge is with cardiovascular disease, 60% of Americans are going to develop it at some point in their life. And obviously, basically anybody in the first world in that sense. The reason why it's so prevalent is because they don't understand what process creates that plaque, which increases the arteriosclerosis risk, which increases heart attack and stroke risk.
Hi, welcome to today's podcast. Today we have the pleasure to have an amazing conversation with Benjamin Lee from 4BPM. He's a specialist in a lot of different modalities in alternative medicine, and he's gonna give us an amazing conversation on different aspects how we can improve our health.
Yeah, Jonathan, thanks for having me. Always a blessing, and really grateful to be here and be able to share what I've learned, along the way, and hopefully it really does, have a positive impact on your audience and your listeners as well.
Yeah, so I'm feeling for Julian. So I'm curious, like, you feel like when you do your lab work, like, can you see like if he's got really autoimmune or?
Autoimmune is a little more difficult to see unless there's some sort of flare up. Let's say your eosinophils, that typically has to do with either an allergy of some sort, right? That can kind of also tie in with autoimmune. We may or may not pick it up. It's more in the symptomology when we're talking to people, right? So I'm wondering how his diagnosing physician, said, okay, it's autoimmune. Like, why? What was the thought process behind it? It may or may not be. I don't know. So I'd love to connect with them and just say, hey, why did they kind of come up with this particular, diagnosis and thought process, and, see how we can help, because again, you got to address the root cause, because you don't, I can sell them BPC or whatever it is, but that won't necessarily solve the issue, right? It'll help a little bit, of course, it'll help, right? But if you don't address what's actually causing it, whether it's the autoimmune issue or whatever else it is, then it'll always come back.
Yeah. I'm gonna talk to him. I think he was. Sometimes there's some people like they I don't know. Like me, when I have a problem, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna tackle that damn problem. Like I'm gonna go like every angle to make sure I hit. So now he's like, okay, the doctor told me it's, it cannot resolve. So it is.
Well, second opinion is always important.
Big time. Health? I think so.
The challenge is that, especially if they're a general practicing physician, like a family doctor, right? They have to know a lot, and they typically know very superficial about a lot, because again, they're not specialists. And the challenge with specialists is that they're in their own silo. So they don't look at it from a comprehensive or holistic perspective, right? So how we kind of filter things through is there's always a pathway that occurs to everything, right? So if we look at, whatever symptomologies are created here, right? What are creating those symptomologies? We got to work backwards from there. Okay, and that's how we try to, figure it out. Because again, what that physician is doing, here's a cluster of symptoms. Hey, here's a script for the symptoms. Okay, versus, hey, what's causing the symptoms? Let's look for the root cause and try to address that issue, right? And again, I had to deal with that with my abdominal issues, because again, they cut me open. They gave me no aftercare instructions, and I had to figure it out for myself, right? Because what's happening is the abdominal muscles up here and down here, the insertion point of the pelvis, they're overcompensating because these aren't firing that well. So I need to release this muscle and get it to relax, and same thing down here, right? But no one really thinks about that in those terms. No. So again, maybe something is pulling something from here or whatever it may be. He might have had some other injury. Hell, it could be some trauma that he's like holding on to, in that area. People hold trauma in different parts and different muscles and the myofascia and all that different stuff as well. So we always look for that holistic approach with, also the explanation as well, because, you're familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza, right?
Yeah, Joe Dispenza is amazing. I mean,
Yeah. So that's the same thing with genetics, right? You can positively or negatively affect your own gene expression, or what we call upregulate and downregulate your gene expression with your mindset alone, right? That's why HEAL Team 6 and people with stage 4 terminal cancer that are given like a month to live, they're able to go to, Dr. Joe's event and basically, cure themselves of their issues because they visualize, their entire body being healthy, and then they show gratitude for that, already have been, being manifested into our reality here, right? So it's the same thing. Like, I know that what we do with the body is not just in the body. There's a lot that's up here as well. So, if we can't find an answer from, this part down, okay, then what else could it be? Right? Is there trauma that this person's dealing with? Is it their mindset? Whatever it could be. So, we look to be in the tangible and intangible, in that sense, because we know that one thing doesn't drive everything. It's all interconnected.
So, it's very, very interesting what you're saying, because basically, like, I just received my blood lab result from Insight Trackers. And the reality is I got everything. And I mean, some things I think are good or bad, but actually I'm not a medical doctor. I don't know, they put some graph, like, to kind of make it like for general public. But I mean, I asked them, like, can I interview them, or can we have consultation? And they said, go on our app and ask AI. But the reality is that, I would love to have access to someone to assess my blood work and really like help me customize like my protocol,
Yeah, no, absolutely. For most people, and even for some physicians, lab work is basically a foreign language. It's just a bunch of numbers and letters, right? You're looking at the reference range, or the reference intervals they call it, but most people don't even understand that each laboratory's reference range can be different as well. So they think it's a concrete goalpost, but it's actually not. Because every laboratory, what they do, they take their entire patient population. So obviously, not every lab tests the same people. And
in the same way.
What they do is they take that entire patient population, and they take 95% of the people that quote unquote aren't sick, right, or whatever that may be for that particular biomarker, and then that's the range. But it's super wide, and it moves. They update the ranges as well.
Okay, so, really? They update the ranges?
Yeah, they update the ranges. Yep, yeah, depending. And you could actually go to, let's say, LabCorp and Quest. You can get the same result and be in range for LabCorp, which means you're quote unquote okay. And then you can have the exact same result and go to Quest and you be out of range, which means you're not okay. So people freak out, and no one tells you that. That's the insane thing. And then also, if you think of the patient population, it's the representation of, let's say, either the Canadian, right, or the U.S. population, which about half of them are obese anyways. Do you really want to compare yourself to the fat majority? Of course not.
No.
You want to know what's actually optimal. So what we've done is we've asked the question, what is really optimal for each one of these biomarkers? Okay, so then you can compare yourself to optimal, let's say, red blood cell count or testosterone or whatever it may be, versus this wide range of, hey, you're not sick. And also physicians, what they're looking for is they're looking for disease. They're looking for an underlying medical condition that they can treat. Right? So they're looking for a cluster of symptoms, and then they assign either an ICD-10 code, which is the diagnosis code, or some sort of a CPT code, so that insurance will pay for it. And a lot of the times they can't order tests because insurance won't pay for it. Right? Because if there's no underlying medical condition that they can point to, then insurers will say, nope, we're not going to cover that. But what we do is we do a much broader and deeper dive. And, the thing is, we don't take insurance specifically because of that, because insurance won't pay for anything. Right? But we're getting a much deeper dive in just our blood lab. So we look at approximately 58 different biomarkers in the blood right off the bat. I mean, obviously, if you have additional challenges or additional symptoms, we can always add more testing if needed. But the off-the-shelf or boilerplate testing, we look at everything from your immune function, your oxygen carrying capacity, which actually determines how much waking energy you have, if you have brain fog, if you sleep well or can recover properly, because you need oxygen for your body to repair and recover at night. We look at your glucose metabolism, which is your A1C, your insulin, your glucose. We look at organ functions such as your kidneys, liver, gallbladder, thyroid. We're looking at sex hormones. We're looking at a very deep dive in your sex hormones as well. So we're looking at your total testosterone, free testosterone, luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, sex hormone binding globulin, PSA for men, progesterone for women, estradiol. We're also looking at certain vitamin levels as well, D3, B12, B9, or folate. We look at your cardiovascular health as well. So we look at your lipid panel. We look at your inflammation within, let's say, your body and your cardiovascular system as well. Even how you produce your natural human growth hormone as well. So, I mean, it's a very deep dive, into your blood. And obviously what we do differently than most people, like you were just talking about Inside Tracker, is everything that we do is customized for each individual.
Okay.
Because we know that not everyone's made alike, right? We're actually the same with regards to DNA. We have the same DNA. 99.99% of our DNA is exactly the same. But there's only a few letters that are changed. And that minute change is actually responsible for all of the uniqueness that everyone on the planet has. So the billions of people on the planet only have very, very slight variations. But in those variations, people have a different starting line, so to speak. So for example, when it comes to genetics, some people have, let's say, the worst expression of what we call AMY1, which is your amylase gene. So amylase is actually in your mouth, it's in your digestive system. What it's responsible for is breaking down carbohydrates. So if you have a lot of amylase production, you're actually more efficient at breaking down carbohydrates. If you have the worst expression of it, you actually have less amylase in your mouth. You have less amylase in your digestive system. So the people with the lowest expression of that AMY1 gene have a high association of weight gain when they eat carbohydrates. And
So,
the DNA is like basically your instruction manual that you've never really had an opportunity to look at.
And this,
It's
you
like-
can see it with blood work, or you do
That's
blood work
genetics.
and other tests?
So that's specifically genetics.
Okay, genetic test.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
And your genetics are that instruction manual that you've never really had a chance to look at. You might get some insights along the way. You're like, hey, if I do this, then this typically seems to happen, right? But you're not 100% sure. It's like trying to go to IKEA and then you try to put together a piece of furniture with no instructions. You're like, I think this is what it's supposed to look like. I'm not really sure. I have some pieces left over, but hey, I'm doing the best I can, right? Which is basically the same thing when you haven't had the opportunity to look into, what your, genetic makeup is. But once you do your genetics, and the great thing is you only have to do it once in your life because your genetics won't change.
So I'm curious. So I've done it with 23andMe. So would you say that I would need to redo it again? Let's say we work together. So would you be able to take that and kind of look at it in your view, or
Yeah.
with a different test, or?
So with 23andMe and Ancestry.com, the challenge with what they have is that a lot of the data they get, it's so broad and diverse that there's no real practical application in what you need to do on a daily basis.
It's funny because I was super excited to do my test, and I was like, okay, cool, I'm gonna know so much thing about me.
Yep.
And then I was like, okay, that's interesting. I'm from that region of Europe. Okay, I'm some information, but I didn't saw the practical think of it, but I thought because I was not expert in any sort of medical, because I didn't have any medical background. So,
Right.
but it's funny from you that is submerged in that, space that you feel that it's not enough, precise, I would say.
It's what we call functional genomics is what we do. So, for example, what 23andMe and Ancestry.com, what they're doing just genetic, like a very, very deep panel. But the challenge is, a lot of the times they're testing for what we call inactionable genes. That means you can't do anything about it. Like your hair color, right? My hair is black until it turns gray, and then I have to keep dyeing it no matter what because it's gray. Right?
Yeah.
My eye color I can't change.
Yeah, it's like, okay, thanks for telling me that I have blue eyes.
Yeah,
I guess I saw it in the mirror this morning, but
Yeah.
so your test. So tell me more. I'm curious. So what does it tell us different?
Yeah,
when you
so
do genetic
with
test?
regards to the functional genomics test, we are actually looking at what we call actionable genes. So we can actually have either a positive or negative influence on these specific genes. And we look at everything from your mood and behavior. So I can actually predict your personality traits
Okay.
based on your genetics because your neurotransmitters are what determine how you feel in any particular moment, which leads to your emotions, which leads to your mood, which leads to your personality. And your genetics determine how well you create those neurotransmitters, how well you transport them, across the different parts of your body, how you bind to them, and then how you clear them out. So we're able to anticipate how people act based on their genetics.
It's funny.
Yeah,
that-
it's really cool. And the practical application of that is when you have couples that are either boyfriend, girlfriend, husband and wife, or whatever gender you want to call it, asexual, whatever. How amazing would it be to understand why your partner acts a certain way, right? And understanding why you act a certain way. So when we uncover that and we tell people, hey, listen, the reason why your, let's say, spouse or partner acts that way in that certain situation is because that's how they're wired. Okay. So then they're like, oh, okay, they're not doing it because of what I'm doing. It's just how they're wired. So then it actually opens up the conversation. It allows them to communicate at least more freely because they're understanding that it's not that they're doing it to spite them or whatever it is. It's just how they're wired, genetically. So then we also look at your cardiovascular health. I mean, cardiovascular health is extremely important.
I have a question just
Yes.
on the gene. How do you call that? The gene test? No,
Functional genomics.
but the test that we're doing, like to see our like 23andMe, we call that what type of test?
It's just a
Genetic test.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Just
Okay.
genetic,
So,
yeah.
but it's funny because I always try to tell myself that it's 20% genetics and 80% lifestyle. Just because I kind of feel like I want to have control on my destiny. But
Right.
do you really feel it's that ratio? Or it's more like 50% genetics and 50% or something else?
I think it's hard to say percentages,
And it's
and
probably
obviously
depending
depending on like how either optimal, moderate, or suboptimal some of these genes are, right? And what happens a lot of times is we don't see anybody that's genetically perfect. I've never, obviously, doesn't really happen. But what the body seems to do is if something's really poor, another part will compensate for it, and that'll be optimal. So those two kind of balance each other out. So with regards to how you can positively influence your genetic makeup or your genetic disposition is a lot of times we see people that develop strategies that overcome some of their genetic predispositions, like just unconsciously or subconsciously. For example, if you look at like professional bodybuilders, okay, most of them have really good genetic makeup, obviously, to be able to get that big, but they're adding more anabolic steroids and androgens to overcome that genetic barrier. That's how they're able to walk around at what, almost 300 pounds
Yeah.
and be like a few percent body fat. That's not normal.
No.
But they found a strategy, whether, obviously, some people are against it, other people are like, that's disgusting, other people are like, that's really cool. We're not talking about the morality of it, but it's a strategy that they utilize to help overcome their genetic predispositions or enhance what they currently already have.
Okay, I understand what you mean. So, yeah, so basically, I mean, yeah, so it's always depending so and also probably what type of gene is affecting. So, yeah. Okay, and so you do genetic tests, you do blood work, and you do probably gut testing, I guess, also.
So, interestingly enough, I've looked at the different type of like stool testing. I just haven't really got into it because I haven't found the connection where the protocols that they implement based on their, the individual's testing has actually made a difference. So, I'm not going to name the company, but I know multiple people that have gone through certain stool testing, and I always ask them, hey, listen, did you get a benefit from it? And most people were like, I don't know. I don't think I did.
Right. I'm using since 3 years Viome gut testing.
Yeah, that's the company I was thinking of.
Yeah, and honestly, like it's been like a year and a half that I'm doing the supplement, and I don't see any result in terms of and it's funny enough, like I'm doing like they give me like the year, like my biological age with Viome and with Inside Tracker, they're not the same.
Right.
So you're like, okay, so can I really trust that? And I really did an experiment. I've done both the same day. Like the nurse came for Inside Tracker and Viome, it's like so I did that last year actually, and like same date, same time, and not the same result. So sometimes, it's like,
yeah, with regards to biological age, there's a lot of different quote unquote algorithms or formulas that they come up, and obviously they're not the same because you're not pulling the same thing, right? You're looking at stool, and what can you really gather from stool?
But they do blood work. Like when you do Viome, you do blood, saliva, and gut.
Oh, okay, got it.
So they match everything.
I was thinking of just the stool sample.
Yeah.
In that case, I know, let's say, the most widely used is what we call the Dunedin Pace, scale, for biological age, and at the end of the day, it's not, let's say, quote unquote accurate. It's just a measurement at which point you can try to positively or negatively affect it, right? It's just like your blood labs; those reference ranges aren't exact, and if you go to laboratory to laboratory to laboratory, there's different reference ranges for all of them. And a lot of people don't even know that there's what we call low, medium, and high complexity laboratories. So if you're low complexity, you have to follow a certain
rules,
procedure, and a certain amount of rules. If you're high complexity, you actually can test out your own methodologies and whatnot. So basically, you're kind of creating, your own in a sense. So it's not always apples to apples when when you're dealing.
Now, man, you fucked me up. Okay, because no, really, I'm gonna tell you why. So this morning I was like reviewing my goals of the year. So I do the whole process, like all my categories of my life, with Tony Robbins, circle of life, and basically in my health and. I put like, okay, so I want to target like a 30 years old biological age. And now I just received my lab result and I'm 37, like 37 in a couple of months, and I'm 37. So I'm about my age. But my thought was like, okay, so that's going to be my reference. And in 12 months, I'm going to retest it. And the goal is to be 30 and less or less, But is that a good goal, or should I find another metric, or how can I see that I'm not, I'm
more. I would say the pace of aging is probably better. So obviously, if you go 1 year, right, that's 1.0. If you can slow down the aging compared to the amount of actual time that elapsed, that's going to be better. So, I was actually watching the documentary with Brian Johnson
Yes,
on
I watch
Netflix.
it also. Yeah.
Yeah, very very interesting.
Yeah.
What they're doing. I love the quote unquote all the haters on him. Hey, he's got the money. Like he can do whatever he wants with it, right? And I really appreciate the fact that he's able to spend a lot of money to test all this stuff out.
Yeah.
And is it really working? Who knows? That's a challenge because he's using so many different things. And
Yeah.
obviously, when you look at it from a scientific perspective, you want to use a double-blind placebo and have a large variety and obviously sample size as well to see if a particular product is actually delivering what you expect. Right? When you're doing over 100 pills a day, right, what's really
Which
working?
one is working?
Not.
Which one is not?
Yeah, is it what he's doing with actually swapping plasma with his son, or like what is it that's working, right? So it's not scientific in that sense. I think we can gain some interesting info from what he's doing, but is it an end all be all? I don't think so. And I think it's just easier to find a test that you just consistently do versus like going around to a whole host of different testing and then just measure that as a delta, right?
But
If
if
you're
I,
here,
if I retest myself with Inside Tracker in 12 months, do you feel that it's a good reference number to target or not?
I mean, you can, but whether you can shave off 7 years biologically, that remains to be seen. Most of the time you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When you get into the like decade, it's a little bit more difficult to do. There are obviously things that can help with lowering that biological age, such as NAD. NAD is great for that. It actually helps to lower the biological age, and it's a cofactor in every single cell in your body, anyways, right? It's naturally occurring in your body, and it helps with everything from lowering your biological age, helps with energy, helps with boosting your metabolism. It helps with having a deeper reservoir of energy to pull from, so your athletic performance improves. And for our patients that do like endurance sports, we have them do NAD because it really gives them that edge, against everyone else that's not doing it. For example, I have patients that have done what they call 29-0-29 Everesting. So they basically climb the same elevation of Mount Everest, but on a different mountain. So they climb up, let's say somewhere in Utah or Colorado, then they gondola down, climb up, gondola, until they reach 29 feet of elevation. And obviously for that, I mean, that's an endurance sport for sure. So to utilize NAD for the training regimen up to and during the event is amazing. Like it really, really does
And do
help.
you feel something when you start taking that? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
like you feel what? Like energy, or you feel?
You feel energy because what NAD does, it's a cofactor in every single cell in your body. It actually facilitates electron transfer and energy transfer. So it actually helps the mitochondria, which are the energy centers within the cells. So it actually facilitates that process. So it helps you, build more energy. Also, from a cognitive perspective, it's amazing. It helps with improving your brain function, reduces Alzheimer's risk. It helps with repairing DNA, lowering inflammation. And they even use it in, let's say, detox and rehab, where addicts, when they're trying to detoxify, they use NAD to help them with the symptoms from detox. And from a cognitive perspective, it's amazing. So obviously, I do a lot of calls like this, and
So that's probably like your flow with your business, your clinic. Basically, it's really. So do we call that a clinic, or is it?
yeah, I guess you can call it a clinic. Yeah,
And
practice.
so you will like you will do all the blood, like the lab work to test to get all the data from the person, and then you will customize like a protocol or supplement. Is it supplement only, or you will go
No.
into the lifestyle and say, okay, here's what we recommend to do. Let's test that and let's see us in 3 months. Or so can you? I'm curious, like to hear more. So
Yeah, absolutely. So we do everything from a science-backed perspective. So everything is quantifiable. That's why when we pull blood, that's quantifiable. And I love the people that are always the forever cynics in a way. They'll go through our process and then we'll order follow-up labs specifically to obviously see how they've improved, and obviously if we need to tweak anything. And there's very few of them, but they're like, I didn't feel anything. This was a waste of money, or whatever it may be, right? And then we actually go through their original testing versus their updated testing, and we're like, well, this improved, this improved, this improved. You should feel this, and this. And they're like,
Maybe it's working.
yeah, you're right. And we're like, hey,
It's a
the
number
proof
of
is
docs, you know.
it's in the numbers. You can't you can't fake the blood test. I mean,
No.
it's just a data set, right? So if you see the improvements, right, or the delta, then that's how you know it's working. And we highly customize everything for each individual, because obviously everyone's genetics are a little bit different. Everyone's, let's say, serum blood levels of certain vitamins, hormones, etc., are different, and we make sure that we understand what that individual wants to accomplish from a short and long-term perspective. And we evolve the protocols as their life conditions change, as their test results change, and even as their goals change. So, even with like one of our patients, originally he wanted to lose weight. That's the reason why he came to us. And obviously there's a specific protocol that's the most efficient to help him lose weight, obviously in a healthy manner, safe manner, and sustainable manner, right? Because you don't want to yo-yo up and down. Mm-hmm. After we helped him accomplish that, then he's the one that wanted to do the Everesting, the 29-29. Mm-hmm. So that's completely different than losing weight.
Mm-hmm. No, it's different goals.
We wanted to make sure that we gave him BPC 157 so that he could recover quickly from his workouts, because again, the training is really difficult for it too. We wanted to make sure that he was getting very nutrient dense nutrition and diet. We gave him NAD, and obviously we tried to give him some cheat codes to help with making that track as easily as possible. And then once he finished that, he's like, now I want to become a professional bodybuilder. It's like, okay, great. It's just depending on whatever it is, we can evolve as that individual evolves with their life conditions and obviously as their goals as well.
Okay. And typically, like the people, like how does it work? Like they come to you, do they need to come to your place to do the blood work or the lab test, or?
No. So we work with LabCorp, and I would say 80% of the population is probably 2 hours from a LabCorp. That's why we utilize them. And then the genetic test and the urine test, we just ship to their home.
Okay.
So, yeah, there are some countries that make it a little more difficult, like Mexico, Portugal, some other countries that don't like saliva or urine being shipped.
What about Canada? Do you feel like with Canada it would work easily, or it would be more difficult?
Canada, we can do some testing, but Canada's difficult because what we've tried to do is, I have a group in Canada that we've partnered with, and we've tried to get blood draws from Canada. Just getting a phlebotomist to ship, obviously draw the blood and then ship it to the US, and we get it overnight. They would overnight it, and then we get the results in 24 hours. But even trying to find a phlebotomist and a physician that will facilitate that blood draw is really, really difficult. I guess the college or whatever that governs the medical industry, they'll get really, I guess, in the way of certain things, because they're like, oh, we don't want you pulling blood draws for no reason or whatever it is. So it's been a little more difficult with Canada because of the socialistic healthcare system.
Yes.
And even just trying to facilitate a blood draw was difficult. I was trying to figure out how we could do that, but we'll see. I'm still always trying to figure out a solution for that, so then we can obviously help more people.
Could you use let's say, so Inside Tracker, like they work with nurses here, and that's the way they process. And so the nurse come here, she's doing the blood test, and then she's shipping out to the lab. But could you use these tests, or you would say it's not enough, or it's not the same biomarker?
No, we could still use that. Yeah, we can use any labs. Yeah, funny enough, I've had people ship me or email me labs from Russia in Spanish.
Really?
Yeah, in different languages. So, luckily with AI and translation services, it allows us to
wonderful
just translate. Yeah, so we've used other laboratories as well. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. And do you do it like every 3 months or every year, or or it's really depending about the individual?
It depends on the individual, but we like to at least give the body some time to adapt to the protocol. So when you do the original one or the first one, let's say, we implement whatever protocol that's based on the lab results and obviously that individual's goals in the short term. And then we typically do another one in 8 to 10 weeks because we want to see how they've progressed and get an idea of the stuff that we need to tweak and the stuff that we can take out, so to speak.
And how much time you said? I heard 10 months.
About 8 to 10 weeks, so about 2 to 3 months. The first one.
8 to 10 weeks. Okay.
Yeah, 8 to 10 weeks. And then from there, typically every 3 to 6 months is the cadence in which we like it. Because in 3 months, your body really doesn't give you that much information to be able to see if a protocol is working. Anything over 6 months, that's a lot of time that elapses.
Yeah, absolutely. And okay. And you were saying before when we were speaking that you want to write a book, basically. On which subject? I'm curious.
So I had some health challenges in June of last year. So literally just a hair over 6 months ago, and for me it was a very difficult experience and much longer than I ever expected. And obviously, being in the health and wellness space, I prided myself on being the epitome of health and wellness, right? Because I am my own best billboard, right? And I don't understand how people aren't congruent with what they're selling, right? Or what they're telling people. You got to walk the walk and talk the talk, obviously. Sure. And in June of last year, mind you, I'd never had any health issues up until that point. And I actually had 4 wisdom teeth taken out. I know I waited a while. I should have done it years and years ago, but I had 4 wisdom teeth taken out on a Friday. This was in mid or late May, and 2 of them were impacted on the bottom. And it was a Friday morning when I did it. I was feeling fine until Wednesday of the next week. My mouth just started radiating pain, like right here. And obviously, when it's in your mouth, like it radiates in your head, and you're just like, oh, it sucks. And the pain medication that they gave me wasn't working. It was, I believe it was Toradol that they gave me. And I called the surgeon. I said, listen, my mouth is killing me. Like, the Toradol's not working. What should I do? And they suggested I do Advil and Tylenol together, 12 pills a day. So 3 times 4 pills every single day. And I ended up doing that, and literally, I want to say it was June 6th. So this is less than 2 weeks later. I had diverticulitis, which is where you have cilia in your intestines, which are basically like little hairs. And something will get stuck in between the hairs, and it starts getting infected. And if it's diverticulitis, basically the infection explodes. If it's diverticulosis, it bleeds. So I had the exploding part, the exploding kind, where I had multiple perforations in my colon, on my ascending colon. And
because of that?
Go ahead.
Because of that, when the explosion did your hole in your...
Yeah, so, and of course, they never give you a straight answer. Yeah. I asked them, what caused this? They're like, we don't really know. I'm like, great. Okay. So what can I do to prevent it? We don't really know. So what I gathered is, 1, genetics, because my father's had diverticulosis 3 times in his life, so partly genetic to some degree. 2, they say once you're over 40, that increases your risk. And 3, because I was taking a heavy amount of NSAIDs, which can actually irritate and damage the intestinal lining, I think it was what we call that perfect storm that happened. And, it was crazy. I was actually on vacation. It was my fiance, my parents, and her parents. They were actually meeting for the first time, which was, great. And the day before, like, I had nothing. We got down to the resort, had happy hour, dinner, no pain whatsoever, like nothing. Then the next morning, I'm great. I wake up in the morning, I have a cup of coffee on an empty stomach, which I typically do. And all of a sudden, my stomach just starts getting like indigestion. And normally, I just take some Pepto or, some Mylanta, whatever it is, that helps calm down, the stomach, and it goes away. But it just wouldn't leave. And I only ate literally like half a piece of toast the entire day. I skipped dinner. I was like, listen, I don't feel well. You guys can go out to dinner. I'll just stay in the room. And, they're like, you should go to the ER. I'm like, we're checking out tomorrow anyways. I really don't feel comfortable going to an ER in the Keys because, hell, my surgeon's probably coming off of, a fishing boat with fish guts still on him, and he's still got his sea legs. So I'm like, you know what? we're leaving tomorrow. Why don't we try to get up closer to home, before we go to the hospital? And, that night I really couldn't sleep. Just, I was just, using the restroom, the whole time. And that morning, still in pain. So, we're starting, just to try to get packed and everything. And, my fiance says, hey, well, I heard, apples are good for you or whatever it is. So I literally took a bite of an apple, like a little bite. And it felt like an open wound was in my stomach and somebody's pouring salt on it. That's what it felt like. I mean, the most excruciating pain. And we got in the car and I was like, listen, let's just try to get close to home as close to home as possible. We live in, Palm Beach County. And I literally felt every little bump, every little acceleration, every, slamming on the brakes or just touching the brakes for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And we got close to Hollywood, which is where her parents live. And she's like, why don't we just go to Memorial Original? I was like, you know what? I don't care. I'm like, that's fine. I'm like, I can't deal with this anymore. And I thought originally it was like a peptic ulcer or something. Mm-hmm. And I got to the emergency room at 4:00. They did a CT scan. They found that there was air bubbles in my abdominal cavity. So, they figured that there was some sort of perforation. And they had me, in the OR by 9:00. And I was on the operating table for 3 hours. And before, when I was getting getting prepped for surgery, I was like, whatever you do, please don't cut me open. Like, just use the laparoscopy, which is, the little cameras and the small incisions. Yeah. Whatever you do, don't cut me open. Right. And then, I will wake up from surgery and the next thing you know, there's a huge scar. I'm like, oh, shit. So, I've had to deal with that for the last 6 months. And the learnings from all of that, everything from obviously NSAIDs are, can be dangerous. If you're taking, a lot of them, at one time, you got to be really careful with that. You got to make sure that you can properly advocate for yourself, because even though I have my medical team, I have 4 physicians in my family, I have a lot of close friends in the healthcare space. My fiance works for Optum, which is part of United Healthcare. So I have access to obviously more physician expertise, knowledge than I would say 99% of the planet, right? Yeah. Even for me, it was difficult to advocate for myself, because what they do, they don't let you sleep in a hospital because they try to wake you up every 2 hours to take your vitals. And I'm like, listen, I'm not dying. Just leave me alone. Like, let me just sleep so I can heal. Mm-hmm. And when they're doing the rounds, they wake you up at 5:30 in the morning when you haven't slept all night, and you have like 8 or 9 people standing at the foot of your bed. They're like, you got any questions? I'm like, I just woke up. Like, I don't even know what up from down is. Like, how can I properly, even ask you educated, questions or, discuss something in depth because you just woke me up, right? So it was very difficult for me to advocate for myself. And the aftercare instructions were basically non-existent. They're like, if you have a fever, come back. If you're dying or something, if you're bleeding, come back. Otherwise, you're fine. Yeah. It's bullshit. Like, obviously, when they cut through, multiple layers of your abdominal tissue and they stitch it all back together, there's going to be some after effects.
Of course.
Right? And, I'm still dealing with some of them. I actually have a spasm on the left side, just the rectus muscle here, because I get out of bed on that side and sometimes it spasms. I went to physical therapy, for 10 sessions for a few months. It didn't really do anything. The last session, she's like, I've done all I can for you. I'm like, well, thanks, but you haven't really done much. So I've had to be more aggressive myself with trying to find more progressive treatment modalities that have helped. So, for example, myofascial release has helped me a lot. Something called Electrons Plus, which is guided PEMF, really cool. It's a little machine. The patient gets attached to a pad, or there's a little pad that you either lay on or touch, and then the therapist connects to the other part of the machine. And it's basically like a TENS unit where you can change the frequency and the intensity, and you can get really, really precise with treating certain areas. So you can see what muscle fibers aren't firing. Because what happens for most people is whenever you have some type of muscular issue, it's the area that you have pain, and then there's the actual area that's causing the pain. So it's typically not in the same place, right? Because if you have pain in your shoulder right here and this is pulling, it's probably this part of the insertion point that's really tight that you got to work out, right?
Really?
So people work on this and they don't work on this, and it always comes back and it's chronic.
Yeah, and that's counterintuitive, but that's I mean, I would have not thought that.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like you need to find a therapist that understands the entire biomechanical chain, so they can identify where the root cause of the issue is, right? Or unless you can fix the pain point, but it'll always keep coming back until you address the actual root cause. And I had other challenges as well because I obviously went to the hospital June 6th. I was in the hospital for approximately 2 weeks. I was recovering, and obviously I have access to a bunch of different things. So I was using BPC 157 right when I got out of surgery, even though I just kind of snuck it into the hospital. I was using an exosome IV once I got out of the hospital. So I was doing everything I could to help maximize my recovery and get back, quote unquote, on the horse as quickly as possible. But then on August 17th and September 17th, literally 1 month apart, I had small bowel obstructions. Basically, it's when your intestines kink and it doesn't let anything pass through.
Oh.
So then you build a lot of pressure behind it, and then your abdominal walls just like cramp, and it feels like, obviously I'm not a woman, but I can probably, believe that it feels a lot like childbirth. Because I mean, literally, your
Like an
abdominal tissues
contraction.
just don't stop cramping for hours, on end. So when you go to the hospital, they obviously give you pain medication, and then they had to put what they call a nasal gastric tube. So basically, a tube through my nose, down my throat, which sucked. I hated that part. And then they have to put it in your stomach. So they start basically sucking out, a lot of the, contents in the stomach to help relieve the pressure. So then hopefully it naturally unkinks itself. So luckily, it did naturally unkink. And, from there, I was in the hospital, I think the first time maybe 4 days, and then the second time like 2 days, right? So I just got obviously, better at, understanding what I needed to do to get out as quickly as possible. But then it just made it more difficult for me to continue living a normal life because I didn't know what was causing that issue. So I had to go to a new gastric surgeon, and it was actually the day before the second time I went to the hospital. It was Monday, so the 16th of September. I went to this new gastric surgeon, and they're like, "Listen, that may never happen again ever, or it can happen all the time." And literally, it happened the next day. So it was obviously just all that uncertainty of never knowing if I ate something, would I end up in the hospital? Right? But then I also had a colonoscopy. They cut out a few polyps that might have been the cause. I'm not sure, right? Because they're not really 100% with what causes that. But I haven't had any reoccurring episodes. And the other part of that, when we're talking about cardiovascular health, I guess you can say the silver lining of this whole experience. One, I could learn from that experience and really teach people the things. Hey, this is the things you need to be aware of and try to avoid. But two, I mean, it was obviously like just crazy. The stuff that you kind of uncover and unpack as you're going through all that stuff. So they, through a CT scan, found incidental calcification of my coronary arteries. And I made a appointment with a cardiologist, and when I went there, they're like, "Okay, we need to get a CT scan with calcium score." So your calcium score, when they test it, it should be 0, but it should be over 100. Mine was at 434, which is obviously significantly higher than what you expect.
434, you mean?
434, yeah, out of it should be 0.
I thought 4.34.
434, yeah, it should be
Okay,
0.
no, that's not good.
Yeah, that's not good whatsoever. And the thing that's crazy is I was doing everything I thought I needed to avoid this issue.
Yeah,
But the challenge is with cardiovascular disease, 60% of Americans are going to develop it at some point in their life. And obviously, basically anybody in the first world in that sense. And the reason why it's so prevalent is because they don't understand, or most traditional physicians or people don't really understand what process creates that plaque, which increases the arteriosclerosis risk, which increases heart attack and stroke risk. So when I went to the cardiologist, the first thing I asked was, "Hey, is calcification reversible?" And if you Google this, everyone says calcification is not reversible.
They said it's not.
They say it's not. If you Google it, if you go on WebMD, everywhere, it says it's not reversible. But you just have to be really aggressive with it and understand what you need to do to help reverse it. So when I went to the cardiologist, he's like, yes, it is reversible. I'm like, okay, good. At least I know I'm in the right place, because if you didn't even believe it was possible, you wouldn't even try to do anything to, achieve that result.
Sure.
And it was interesting because he said, I want you off of everything. So no vitamins. He's like, I want you to get off testosterone replacement therapy, and you should be completely natural. And I was like, okay. I'm like, listen, I'm in the space, so here's the reason why I do everything, right? And my fiance's there, and they're kind of like ganging up on me, and like, hey, just do whatever he says. So I'm like, okay, fine. I will listen to you. I will try it out, and just see where we go from there. So I had been on testosterone replacement therapy for over 10 years, and my testosterone levels were, continuously, right around, 1,000 or a little bit higher. And when I got off of it, obviously you get a huge drop, but it takes a while to get there, because if you're using like testosterone cypionate, it has an 7 to 8 day half-life. So it takes about a week for it to clear out half, right? So it takes about 6 weeks typically for it to clear out. And my testosterone got down to 61. And I was trying to re-engage my own natural production as best I could. So, I was taking testosterone boosters such as clomiphene, ganirelin, HCG on a daily basis to try to re-engage whatever I could. And I had just a whole host of just mental health challenges, because even though you share with everyone, you teach everyone, you educate everyone, like, hey, testosterone is great because it does help with mental health. It does give you more confidence. It does give you more drive and ambition. But sometimes when you're going through it yourself, like, you can't see the forest from the trees sometimes. So I got in really dark places because, again, my testosterone was 61, and I had no motivation. I would sit on the couch and mope. I didn't want to walk the dog, even to the point where, my fiance was like, you're not like having sex with me, so you're cheating on me. I'm like, I swear to God, it's not you, it's me. Like, I can't even achieve, what they call morning wood, because, my testosterone is so low. And like, it was in November where I was like, you know what? Like, I finally figured it out, where I was talking to a therapist. I had hired a psychiatrist as well, because I'm like, okay, like this, I need to figure out what's going on here. And I told my fiance, I'm like, listen, I can't do this anymore. Like, this, I know this is not me. I'm not mopey. I don't know why I don't have drive. Like, I'm like 100%, I'll just go after it, right? And I told her, I'm like, listen, I'm going to do another blood test, and if my testosterone is low, I'm going to try to get back on, just because I just can't be like this anymore. And when I pulled the test after, what was it? So it was August was 61. In November, I was at 132. So I only doubled it. And below the range is 264. So I was like, okay. I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I'm going to get back on testosterone replacement therapy. And I was like, I'll do the smallest amount just to see how I am. So I didn't do the injectable because the half-life is much longer. So I did Rapidazole tablet with 200 milligrams. So I put it under my tongue, let it dissolve. And like, within an hour, I was like, oh my goodness, I feel back to normal again. Yeah, I mean, it was like night and day. I was like, oh my God, I feel back to normal again.
Like, I wait 4 months for that, for an hour. Like in 1 hour. Yeah,
it's crazy. But it also reminded me, because again, I had been on testosterone replacement therapy for so long, and I remember having like depression symptoms when I got off of it as well last time. But again, you really forget about that, because again, what your new normal is, right? You don't really think about the past in that sense, and when you're going through it yourself, right, it's an emotional journey as well. So I'm glad I was able to uncover that, because there's so many learnings, in that 6 month period with regards to hell, you have to advocate for yourself. Like, no one's going to advocate more strongly for you, but to properly advocate for yourself, you need to have a base level of knowledge with with what's happening in here, right? So you need to have a base education. Obviously, how we do that, we try to educate all of our patients, and that's what we believe is the cornerstone of each of our patients' experience. Because when we walk them through their blood labs, when we walk them through their genetics, we've had physicians and biologists say, hey, you're giving a dissertation on the human body and then, in those lab reviews, because we believe that once you understand what's happening in your body and we tie each of those biomarkers into a specific function of what's happening in here and how you're going to feel when you optimize this versus when you don't, then you know what you're doing on a daily basis is getting you closer or much farther away from your goals, or if you're being counterproductive. Mm-hmm. Right? And then obviously, with regards to, some of the, other challenges, the physical challenges that I had, the small bowel obstructions, and obviously, the mental health challenges that I experienced too, because of, what occurred. So that's why, I'm going to, put it in a book, course, because the thing is, like, people need to know this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you don't have the awareness that it's there for you, right? If you don't even know this information is available, then, how can you properly, first of all, advocate for yourself? And second of all, know what you're doing is actually, working or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so, for example, like one of my employee, his name is Julian, and we exchanged by text message, he's got like an autoimmune disease in his shoulder. And actually, I asked him to contact you, and and because he was talking to me about peptide, and that's a little bit why I wanted to go deeper in that, because honestly, like, I know nothing about peptide, and there's two person that told me you're an expert on that, so I wanted to pick your brain, and I really wanted to help my employee also, and it's funny when you're speaking about like the mental, like when it affect our mental health, I would say. They gave him like some medication. I don't remember the name. I can source it, and the doctor never told him that he had that one of the counter effect was like the mood swing and like mood. Like, I'm very curious to tell you what he's taking.
Maybe methylprednisone or something like that, or some sort of a steroid potentially.
So actually, and he's taking also. Let me see. But one of the reasons also why he's in Florida right now. Like he's like 20 minutes from your place, but he's thinking like peptide, because we're talking about peptide, but maybe something, maybe there's something else that he should do,
Right.
Because
well, here's the thing with regards to using the peptide, that's kind of a means to an end, so to speak. And with regards to his shoulder, if it really is an autoimmune disease, he's got to address the autoimmune disease as well. Because yes, we can give him, let's say, BPC 157 or whatever it may be, but if you don't address the root cause, then it's always going to come back no matter what, right? And at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to help him solve the issue, not just mask it.
So he's taking pregabalin, prednisone.
Oh, prednisone, yeah. So yeah, prednisone is
pregabalin, and prednisone. Yeah.
Yeah. So the prednisone is a is a type of a steroid, which it's not. You shouldn't use that long term. So depending on if it is really an autoimmune disease, and again difficult to say without
And he was saying thymosin beta 4.
Okay, thymosin beta 4.
But was something that I think he was doing some research online and he saw that could be beneficial. But the thing is, like peptide, do you need to take it like every day or every week, and then it takes time to affect, or?
So with his specific situation, BPC 157, TB 4-frag is, as you're calling it, or TB 500, that all can help. But also what he needs to do is he needs to address what the actual issue is with his shoulder. If it is actually an autoimmune disease which is attacking whatever, his tendons or his joints or whatever it is, then he's got to address that first before, he even starts on the BPC.
But the doctor said there's nothing to do, my friend. The only thing you can do is to take pills so you don't feel the pain. But the pills that he's taking is so strong that now his mood is like going to the floor. And it's affecting everything in his life. But he still feels the pain. So it's like... So he doesn't know what to do.
If I were him, and again, we're not diagnosing him at all.
No, it's just a conversation. Two random guy on YouTube talking,
So, personally, what I would do, and again, I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV.
Yeah.
Like we have our medical team that does, all of the, diagnoses and the scripting and whatnot. But if it was me personally, I would figure out what I would need to do to address the autoimmune issue, right? If it is really an autoimmune disease. So how you can do that with vitamin D3. One of the things that it does is it helps to regulate the inflammatory response and also stop cytokine storms. So cytokines are peptides as well. Interestingly enough, most people don't know that. So what happens is the cytokines basically help signal the body to repair whatever area or to basically attack that area. And sometimes our autoimmune system gets too overactive, right? So it's what we call a cytokine storm. And that occurred a lot. And if you've heard of cytokine storms, it may have been from COVID, right? So people with long COVID, what
So
happens
he had COVID before also. So that's
Okay.
they told him that maybe COVID triggered that because
Okay.
he had that maybe like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and but now he had COVID recently, and after that it's starting to
Come
affect him.
back. So my fiance also had long COVID as well. So we've had to work on her as well because it's something that obviously is a challenge for a lot of people that experience it. She used to work out twice a day, like 4 or 5 times a week back in the day.
Okay.
Now she can't work out as much because it creates too much inflammation in her body. And now she's actually lost more weight than she was back then because also genetically she's more prone to inflammation as well. So for her, it made more sense to actually limit the number and limit the intensity of her workouts. So then, it does reduce that inflammation. So, vitamin D3, K2 can help because it helps, obviously govern that inflammatory response. Also, helps to lower the cytokine storms. 2, inflammation, right? Making sure that you're addressing the inflammatory issue as well. Because inflammation is the body telling you that there's something wrong. Okay, it's that signal. So the thing is, whenever we do anything, any ing, whether it's breathing, respirating, exercising, sleeping, digesting, we're always creating inflammation or oxidation, what we call reactive oxygen species. That's the waste product that's created in the processes that occur in our body. Well, you have to have a higher antioxidant load versus oxidation load to help with that and to help with the inflammation. So something that we found that's really, really powerful, it's called astaxanthin. Most people have probably ingested it before, they just didn't know it. If you've had farm salmon before, it's actually the thing that makes farm salmon pink. It's typically gray or white. It's actually what makes farm salmon pink. And it's an amazing antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, 6,000 times more powerful than vitamin C. And it also helps to express your longevity gene, what we call your FOXO3 gene. So that's what we use for the inflammation. So for him, identifying things that he can do to help obviously lower that immune response, right? Lower that inflammatory response, lower that cytokine response, and also address the inflammation. Then on top of that, the BPC 157 can help, the TB4 frag can help, other peptides such as samorelin, tesamorelin that help to basically turn off the signal to tell the pituitary gland to release more human growth hormone can also help as well because human growth hormone does help with recovery too. So there's a lot of different avenues that he can take to address his issues.
But Ben, please tell me, can you explain me, like if I'm a 5 years old person, okay, what is it peptide? Like
Sure.
tell me please, because like we keep using that word and I really want to know.
So peptide
5 years old.
is a really, really fancy term. Okay, really, really fancy term for things you already know. Okay, so a peptide is just what we call a very short amino acid chain. Okay, so amino acids are the building block of protein. So there's 20 different amino acids. There's 9 essential, 11 non-essential, I believe, or I can't remember. I think it's 9 essential, 11 non-essential. The non-essential ones means you can create on your own. 9 means you have to get it from diet or some sort of supplementation. So those little building blocks build the peptide. The peptides are typically, and they move this definition a few times, between a 2-chain amino acid up to, they say, I've heard 44, 50, 60, 70. They've moved the guidelines of what an actual peptide is. It's just a shorter amino acid chain versus the really complex protein chains. And what peptides do, they basically help signal the body to do things, pretty simply. And they help control, certain processes, and, they just help, the body do certain things. So for example, you've heard of insulin before. Insulin's a peptide. If you've heard of endorphins, right? What's released during exercise, those are peptides. Pepsin, all those are peptides. It's just a much shorter amino acid chain versus, the longer proteins. Okay, and, if you think of it like a set of Legos, right? If the most basic one is if you put one Lego on top of another, right? And that has its job. Okay, so when it goes and does its job, what'll happen is after it does its job, it's typically turned into waste product, and then you recycle that waste product back into the amino acid, right? Until it's built to something else, let's say. Right? And obviously, depending on, what that peptide is made to do, and all these proteins are made to do as well, it's just, and this happens billions of times like in every single cell in your body as well. You have the amino acids that are built into whatever they're supposed to do, everything from, governing, so many different, processes in the body, like neurological function, hunger, like muscle recovery, everything, right? And, we just use those, peptides now, right? We supplement with them, what we call exogenous, because it's coming from the outside versus the inside, to help enhance that signaling to the body to do more.
So do we take peptide because our body is not able to do enough by itself, or is it,
Yeah, obviously sometimes, for whatever reason, whether it's genetic or you don't have enough of the raw material to build, that particular peptide, or if you just want more of the specific outcome, let's say, right? So let's say BPC 157, right? It's body protection compound 157, and it works extremely well for recovery. So I used it, after my surgery. I've had so many different just amazing like stories and really feedback about how it works so well. So for example, a really close friend of mine, super strong guy, like he was lifting 80-pound dumbbells each. Okay. Like, I mean, I've never done that ever. And he's repping it out for like a 10 count, and he was doing it to show his girlfriend, and obviously to impress her and whatnot. And so he did it, and then she's like, wait, do it again because I want to video it and show it to my dad, right? So he did it again, and then not long after, he popped his bicep tendon. And then he went to...
Good job, buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope you got that on the videotape.
No. So I think he was like pushing something, and then it popped. So like one of them popped, and then the other one popped later on. So... he's in Cleveland, and he went to the surgeon that works with the Cleveland Browns and the Cleveland Cavaliers. So obviously, one of the best surgeons because you're working with professional athletes. And when he did this, the two bicep tendon surgeries, we gave him BPC 157, and that surgeon was like, I've never seen anybody recover so quickly from this surgery, ever. And even my fiance, her mom went to get eyelid surgery. This is maybe about a year ago, and she's I think 70. And we gave it to her right after the surgery. So she started taking it, one in the morning, one in the evening, and it limited the bruising. And her surgeon said the same thing when she went for her follow up 2 weeks later. They're like, "How the hell did you recover so fast? You're 70 something years old."
Yes.
Right. So the BPC 157 is great for recovery. It helps with, obviously, if you go through a surgical procedure, we've had people that have had rhinoplasty. My surgery, I took it as well, and they've seen phenomenal results. Where typically, again, these results are atypical, right? I don't want the FTC to say anything about this, but we've seen, a reduction in the recovery time. Sometimes, a third or half of the recovery time typically. For people that shouldn't recover that quickly.
And is it something natural? Let's talk about this one, the BPC one. What's the
BPC 157?
157.
So it's actually created from gastric juice. It's actually created from stomach juice. It's what we call a pentadecapeptide, And what it does, it helps signal the body to help with recovery. It helps with what we call angiogenesis, which is creating new healthy blood vessels. It helps with bone breaks as well. So it's just facilitating,
But I
the
mean,
recovery
is
process.
it done like in a lab? I mean, it's done. It's not coming from a body, right? Like, is
Correct.
it a pill or it's like a so?
So there's
How do
there's
you?
both. There's injectables. I've seen it in transdermal patches. I've seen it in oral deliveries, like
Is there a better
capsules
way
or
to?
pills. Yeah, and obviously, in the world we live in now, we're able to look at the chemical structure and recreate it in the lab. Right.
Okay.
So even let's say with testosterone, right, it's what we call bioidentical hormone replacement therapy because the body can't tell the difference between what's quote unquote synthetically made in a lab versus what's actually in the body.
Okay. So, but the peptide can. So first off, I mean, I'm sure there's how many type of peptide can we take? Like, is there
Oh,
like
there's so many different types
hundreds or
of peptides.
thousand or ten?
There's hundreds, if not more.
Hundreds.
Like yeah,
Okay.
there's and the Russians are really aggressive with their peptide research. Here it's not as much because obviously with the FDA, they've actually in I think it was like was it six months ago or a year ago? It was more than 6 months ago. A year ago, they came up with what they call a safety directive, I believe it was, or a safety bulletin for all of these peptides. So they took it off the market and prevented, let's say, compounding pharmacies from compounding a lot of the different peptides. So,
Okay.
you got to be really careful with where you source it from. There's a lot of companies out there, and a lot of people don't even know this is what they do. They find the loophole and they say, oh, these are research peptides only. It's not for human consumption. If you read the fine print, you're not supposed to use it and either ingest it or inject it into you.
And they're selling it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So
basically, so it's kind of good that we have sort of a regulation from FDA, or
it
they
is
could do a
it is
better
to
job
some
at it.
degree, yes. So the challenge is people will always find a way around the guidelines, and people are putting their health and their life at risk if they're working with an unreputable source. So obviously the stuff that we work with, it's always coming from a compounding pharmacy or an FDA registered facility. Typically they're what we call CGMP, which is certified good manufacturing practices, which takes a whole nother level of testing beforehand. So for example, with good manufacturing practices, you need to have a master manufacturing record for how you do everything along that specific process for that specific formulation. And when they get the raw materials in, they have to quarantine them. Basically, they can't allow it to go into the manufacturing suite yet. So what they have to do with the raw materials, they have to test it for microbes. They have to test it to see if it's what it is that they say it is. They have to make sure it's not adulterated with anything. They have to make sure there's nothing in it, right? And they say what they say it is. So obviously, it's much more expensive to do that because you're testing that before it even gets through into the system. And if it fails, they have to kick it out. They have to throw it away. Okay. And if it passes, then that's when they say, okay, we'll go ahead and let this into, the manufacturing process. So, always choose companies
Yeah.
that are, good manufacturers, what they call CGMP, certified good manufacturing practices, and obviously an FDA registered facility.
And
Okay,
would you
so
say like there's some peptide that can be dangerous even if they're in a GMC um, regulated, or is it?
it's better
And
if it
then,
is. Obviously, it goes through much more stringent protocols. But again, you just got to make sure, right? You got to be absolutely sure that
yeah.
you're working with an absolutely reputable source.
But I mean, the body, can you reject it? Like, let's say like the peptide that you were saying, like, can we? Is there like some people that they have some sort of a condition that we cannot give it to them, or like, do you need to do
Yeah.
tests
Yes.
before?
Yes. Absolutely. So, for example, if you have active cancer, right? If you have active cancer in your body, you don't want to fuel that growth with any type of growth hormone or any type of peptide that may increase human growth hormone production or protect the cancer. So you got to make sure that that's you're okay there because
Yeah, yeah,
obviously that can always exacerbate the conditions.
absolutely, absolutely. And okay, so basically peptide, it's one of your tool in your toolbox, but I mean, obviously so what are your other tools? I'm curious. Do you?
So what we do is, we use advanced diagnostic testing to really help guide us to the path that we're going to take with that, individual patient. Because when people ask me, they're like, "Hey, what do I need?" I'm like, "Why do you even want me to guess? Like doesn't make any sense. Like we're going to let your body tell us exactly what it needs because I could guess, to the moon, but am I going to be wrong? Probably not, but why don't we just wait till your test results come and we can be clear on what we need to do?" So what we do, we use blood testing, genetics, urine testing or metabolomics as we call it, cancer screenings, and also pharmacogenomics or PGX. And we take that data, we meld it with whatever that individual wants to accomplish from a short and long-term perspective, and we evolve the protocols with whatever obviously their life conditions are and whatever they want to accomplish, as well as their lab results. Okay, so everything is highly customized for each individual. Okay. And the interesting thing is you see a lot of people, they're like, "Oh, I'm doing this, and this." Okay, well, that's great, but why are you doing that, right? Do you have data that's backing you up on that specific decision that you're doing? Are you sure what you're implementing into, let's say, your lifestyle is the most efficient way to get to whatever goal you're trying to accomplish? So, for example, I had a patient. She's like, "Oh, I've been doing cardio for 20 minutes every, for however long, and I haven't lost weight or been able to burn fat." Well, I could have told you that because what happens is when you're doing cardio, if you haven't eaten, right? So if it's fasted, and if you eat, you actually add more calories you need to burn off first before you start depleting the glycogen that's in your liver and your muscles. And you typically have about 20 minutes of glycogen stored, in your liver and your muscles. So if you ate something before you did cardio, you have to burn through all that calorie and food first before you start actually depleting the glycogen store. And then you start metabolizing fat. Okay, but even if you didn't eat anything, right, there's no calories there. But if you're only doing 20 minutes of cardio, you're just depleting the glycogen within your liver and in your muscles. All you have to do replace it is eat and give your body some time and it replaces. You didn't burn any fat whatsoever. So she thought that she was doing something that was positive, but it really wasn't moving the needle at all. Right? Or let's say people that go to Orange Theory, or they're doing high intensity interval training fasted. They're actually being extremely counterproductive because when your heart rate gets above 75% of your max heart rate, you actually can't burn fat. The only two fuel sources you can burn are carbohydrates and protein. So if you go to, let's say, Orange Theory fasted, you have 20 minutes of glycogen stored in your liver and your muscles. You can do really well for the first 20 minutes and then you crash because you don't have the fuel source that you need, carbohydrates, to power the body when you're above that 75% of the max heart rate. And what they're doing is they're actually eating away their own muscle, what we call going catabolic, as fuel. And their body has to basically take whatever they eat and replace that muscle. That's why they're not losing weight, right? So I used to have a close buddy of mine. He was about my height. I'm 6'2", and he was about 240, 250. And he would wake up in the morning, 3 or 4 in the morning, and he would always take a picture of his watch that showed he did like a crazy intense workout for an hour. But he was still fat. And I was like, dude, I love the dedication. I love the commitment, but you're doing it wrong. And, it's that inability to filter through that information to see if it actually applies to what they're trying to accomplish in that specific situation to get that specific result. That's what we really help people uncover.
Okay. Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. That and how does it work? Is it like a year package, or it's like per session, or how do you structure it?
We just
Per
do
hour,
everything a la carte. So depending on what that individual wants to accomplish, we'll recommend certain testing to address whatever that may be, whether it's weight loss, could be something along the lines of, their children having behavioral issues, then we'll typically do the genetic test. With our professional athletes, amazing thing we can do is what we call metabolomics. It's a urine test that tests for the waste metabolites in the urine. We can figure out which vitamins and minerals they're deficient in, so we can get really, really targeted there. And then obviously with the people that want that extra, let's say, like safety net, right? The cancer screening is great because it tests for 50 different active cancers. And then, the PGX, which is what we call pharmacogenomics, that's also genetics. It explores how your genetics metabolize certain pharmaceutical compounds. So if you go to the hospital and you have that piece of paper or you have that report, you can show it to the attending physicians, and that could actually save your life because they're not having to guess which drugs work really well for you and which ones don't. So, I mean, literally, it could be a lifesaver. So, just depending on whatever that individual wants to accomplish, we do everything, like I said, a la carte. And, same thing with our protocols as well. So, hey, listen, here's everything you can do to optimize, all of your biomarkers or your genetics, right? At the end of the day, obviously, other people have really, really, amazing economic means. Other people don't. And for the people that do, they order everything, and the people that don't, we say, hey, listen, what's your budget? We're going to tell you exactly what parts of your protocol are going to give you the highest bang for your buck or the highest return on investment.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, in one sentence, I think the summary of our conversation is like, you need to get the data from your own body in order to make your own protocol. And everybody is different,
Right, exactly. Like, why guess? It doesn't make any sense. When people are like, oh, you should sell supplements on Amazon or whatever it is, I'm like, yeah, but that kind of defeats our entire philosophy of why don't we see if the body needs it first, and then if it does, great. But if it doesn't, then why are we selling it? So, yeah, I always go back and forth with that because, yeah, we can add value in the supplements, but it doesn't make more sense for that individual to understand if they actually really need it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so cool. Okay, so that gives me an amazing, how can I say that?
Insight
Overview.
is what we do. Yeah, overview, summary, insight. Yeah.
So finally, we had no construction.
Yes. Funny. I was like, oh yeah, we'll probably talk for a few minutes and then it's going to be crazy loud. But yeah, okay, we got through most of it. I would assume, unless do you have any other things you want to discuss at all?
Yeah, honestly, like right now, I'm curious. So, what's your story with Tony Robbins? Like, how long have you been into the Tony worlds and your implication and what you did? I'm curious.
Actually, last year was my 20th anniversary of going to Tony. Funny, he lives right across the water from me. Like I could literally, run to his house in like 10 minutes. And my first event was Las Vegas digital delivery, which is crazy because most people didn't even know what digital delivery was back then. So what they would do, I believe it was an auditorium of some sort in Las Vegas, and they had a facilitator and they had Tony on the screen.
Oh, really?
Smaller. I think it was only 150 or 200 people. And
Okay.
it's crazy now because they do it, through the Zoom platform, right? And it reaches how many thousands of people across the world.
So they're gonna do the Rise, the Rise to Summit, or like there's a free 3 days event, and they have over 1 million people looking live.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's great.
Obviously, people became more comfortable with the virtual platform because of COVID, right? And obviously, the remote work and having to work from home. And I've been through, I don't know how many events. I'm also an ultimate fire teamer, so I would do the volunteering to help build the fire for UPW. I've done leadership, which is amazing. I've also worked with Steve Linder. He also used to be a trainer for Tony and did his master strategist course for neurolinguistic programming. Yeah, I love that stuff, and we actually incorporate a lot of that stuff into the conversations that we have with our patients because obviously they have to have enough leverage over themselves to make sure that they can do whatever is necessary to achieve their goals. So, if I feel like somebody may need an additional push, we incorporate that, into the conversation. Sure. And, we'll obviously try to, deframe, reframe, let's say, their strategies as well, if need be. It's been extremely helpful. One of the best decisions I've ever made in my life, really, to attend Tony. And it's obviously just an amazing environment. I love going back because where else can you for 4 days or a week just get re-energized with all the other people that are just vibrating at a different level.
Yeah.
It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I'm so blessed to be in that community. Yeah. And so, do you see like Fountain of Life or Fountain Life like competing with your what you're doing, or not so much?
Well, I know that Tony has found life in Life Force.
And Life Force also, yeah.
I know with the Apex, it's just a really, really high price point, and I've had people that came from them specifically like, hey, what do I need to pay you on a monthly basis, to order from you? I'm like, nothing. You just order whatever you want to order. They're like, really? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, why would I charge you a monthly fee? Like we don't charge for consultations. Everything's just baked into the pricing. So the only thing we charge on top of is just the shipping fee, right? We don't charge for the syringes. We don't charge for anything above and beyond what we provide, either from a service or.
But they do MRI and they do other tests.
Yeah.
I mean,
and what we do, we're more focused on virtual because we can reach more people.
of course, absolutely. I mean, I'm in Canada. I mean, right now there's a beautiful snow outside, and you live in West Palm Beach. So I mean, obviously, that's the beauty of of the virtual world.
Yeah.
But does it happen sometime that you would say, you know what, I think that you should do an MRI or you should do this in some scenario? Or
Yeah, absolutely. Depending on what that individual is trying to address, whether it's certain issues or symptomology, we may say, hey, listen, it might behoove you to go get this test done. Yeah, we'll try to facilitate it if we can. If not, we say, hey, listen, try to go to your primary care provider and just say, hey, listen, this is what you're looking for, right? So, we try to facilitate that process as much as we can, but obviously, we know that, it's not always as easy. Obviously, in different countries, we have patients all over the world, not just, all over the U.S., but, all over the world as well, so.
amazing. And and I'm curious, like, why did you get in that space? Is it because like your family was also like in the medical? Like, I'm curious, like your background, like why you picked that.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, I've actually been an entrepreneur my entire life, and I have 4 physicians in my family, so I know that side of the space really well. They're in anesthesiology, plastic surgery, emergency medicine, and pediatrics, right? So really, really diverse. So we really don't talk about what I do because, again, I didn't go to medical school, but I understand how the body works and what we need to do to optimize it. Because obviously, right off the bat, because I didn't go to medical school, right, I just read a lot and I research a lot, and I've learned from a lot of experts as well. And the one thing I know is that I don't know everything. That's the only thing I know, right? And I'm always looking to learn from other people, other experts, and always try to find a better mousetrap or whatever it is, a better process or a more efficient process to get to whatever goals we need to achieve for ourselves and obviously our patients. And the reason why I got into this space was when I was 13 years old, I was 6'2" and 135 pounds. So
At which
I was
age?
13. I was, yeah. So what is that? That's 60 kilos. I think it is 60 kilos. So super. I mean, I was light. If a stiff wind blew by, I either froze to death or blew over. I mean, that's how skinny I was. And at age 15, I started working at a nutrition store, and I completely geeked out. I read Bill Phillips' Body for Life. I learned what HMB did, creatine. So I'm like, oh, creatine, helps to facilitate, the ATP, production. And I just completely geeked out. And by senior year, I got up to 175 pounds, and then, by the time I was a freshman, I was 185. And it's always just been a lifestyle for me. But I always just kind of ebbed and flowed with regards to, being in shape and not being in shape, being in shape, not being in shape. And I always was trying to find the easiest way or the path of least resistance to whatever goals I wanted to achieve. And, as I mentioned before, I started in real estate. Then after the crash in 2008, then I was actually a financial trader. So I was a day trader. I became a trading psychologist, so I implemented a lot of that, the psychology piece, wrote a bunch of, books and courses. And then my parents started investing in microcap public companies, and one of them was in the pharmaceutical drug delivery technology space. The other was in cannabis. So that was, kind of my introduction into, looking at, healthcare and, the human body and what we could do with supplements and obviously, certain pharmaceutical compounds in cannabis. And then from there, I started working with Gary Brecka, who started Streamline Medical Group, and I was the chief operating officer of that company, and then I left it, as it was getting acquired by Grant Cardone and Brandon Dawson. So
And that was how many years ago, or
that was I left in 2021.
okay, so about
Yep. And then
3-4 years ago.
yeah, so I started 4 BPM a few months in September of 2021. Yeah, and it was amazing because originally I didn't want to get into the space again, and then through happenstance I literally just fell back in love with being able to help people and educate people, because there is such a disconnect between most providers, and again I know that side really well, and the normal person, and we really try to bridge that gap between the two, right? And really the best way to get there is through education. And when we educate somebody, we empower them to really take control of their health and wellness again.
Yeah, that's so nice. And I relate so much because like one of my personal goal that I set myself like 10 years ago, I completely switched my health around and put it at the number one position. Right. It's like when you re-engineer your values, like it's like health is number one. But I've done it like not with Tony Robbins process, like just with myself. And I started to visualize myself at 95 years old, dropping from an helicopter, doing ski in the Canadian Rockies,
That's amazing.
And so that was my visual, and I'm actually going to do a poster or something like to really always see it. So it's been like almost 10 years that I'm priming myself with that goal. And in a couple of months or maybe a year after, I decided to switch it and said, okay, so now I want to do it, but with my love, with my wife, my kids, and now I see the picture like, okay, it's me. I'm doing some ski with my daughter and with my, my wife, she's watching, I don't know from where, and I realized like health is number one, and I don't want to be alone alive. I want to be with the people I love. I want to live beyond 100. But I truly want to educate people and help people, So as I go through that learning journey, doing the podcast, then I can help other people achieve the same, And I think it's one of the most beautiful gifts we can give to the world. It's to just help people living longer and healthier, because in my mind, that's the number one priority,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
you can have money, you can have good relationship, you can have whatever else, but if you're sick and dead, it's like
Doesn't matter. Like,
there's nothing,
Ralph Waldo Emerson was quoted saying, "The first wealth is health." This one really hit me right here. Somebody the other day told me this quote. It was, "The healthy man has 100 wishes. The dying man only has one wish."
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, obviously, going through my own health crisis, and hell, it gave me just incredible perspective. Obviously, because I had thought I was doing everything that I needed to do to extend my health span, my lifespan, and be in phenomenal shape. But even for me, I was a little bit off the mark there. So with obviously the calcification, I'm doing a lot to address that issue and working to reverse the calcification here, working to lower the fight or flight response, because that's actually what happens for a lot of people. That fight or flight leads to cortisol, which leads to inflammation, and then the inflammation is here in your cardiovascular system. That LDL goes and seeks it out. Everything works out perfectly. It's no issue. But if it meets a toxin or oxidizes for any reason, then it creates plaque, right? When you create plaque, that's what raises blood pressure, increases heart attack and stroke risk, right? So, addressing all of the specific pathways that you can is going to help tremendously versus just one piece, right? So most of the other, traditional allopathic disciplines, they only focus on one thing, which is LDL cholesterol. Right? It's like looking at a pipe that's leaking all up and down the pipe in 5 spots, and then plugging the end of the pipe and expecting the rest of the pipe to stop leaking as well. which doesn't make any sense, right?
No.
So you got to understand, hey, what is the actual pathway that's causing all of these issues, and you have to address at each one. That's how you're going to have the best success, in the reversal of that calcification. So
Yeah.
it's been a hell of a journey. I'm excited to help so many more people. And one of the things I was talking about before we started recording was I'm actually working on building a platform where anybody in the world can upload lab results. Because again, if you don't have a base level of education, if you don't understand what's happening in here, you can't make proper decisions or educated decisions on your health and wellness lifestyle, and you can't properly advocate for yourself. So we're gonna make this available to to everyone. And the reason why I thought of this particular platform is because my fiance is from Medellin, Colombia. We've been there a few times the last couple of years, and I looked at the environment there and how it was such an untapped resource, right? Untapped market. But the challenge was there's a pharmacy on every single corner. And that's how we typically monetize our patients, right? We make a little bit of a delta on our testing, but our lifetime value of our clients really increased because they stay on, they order, more supplements or whatever it may be, and we make a delta on that. So I was like, how can I make money doing that, but also educating the people that need it the most? Because one of the times we were in Medellin, she left her phone in her car, in an Uber, I'm sorry, and we watched the Uber going to one of the comunas, which is one of the very dangerous parts of the city where police don't even go. And then I was like, those are the people that need it the most. Because a woman had contacted my fiance and said, hey, listen, I found your phone. She said, hey, listen, I'll give you a reward. Just bring it back. And, she came, and I think, my fiance had given her a few hundred US. She's like, are you sure? Because it was basically what she made in a month or 2 months.
Oh, wow.
And then I was like, man, somebody like that is who needs help the most. So how can I help the people that don't have access, like me, to physicians, to the knowledge, to the expertise, and how do we help them but still be able to monetize it in a way? So, and I literally spent like a year trying to think about this. I literally beat my head against the wall. I was like, how can I do this? How can I do this? And, it finally dawned on me, creating a platform for everyone to be able to upload their lab results, where it actually spits out, based on their individual labs, a educational component where it's super simplified like we do already, and that'll get them the base level of education.
Understanding.
Right? And understanding. Then how do we monetize it? We're actually going to make it freemium, where we give away certain biomarkers for free, and we're going to make it viral because we're going to try to gamify it, right? So to say, hey, you can challenge, these other people around the world. The more you improve your biomarkers, hey, you can get in these contests, right? Because everyone, loves to see how they're doing against everyone else. But the more people they refer to the platform, the more features they unlock, right? So we create that, virility in the platform. And also providing a service where we basically translate whatever is, let's say, ailing them into physician speak, right? Because again, even if you have a base level of knowledge, how do you communicate it properly to the physician, right? In the US, allegedly, we have an average of 16 minutes per consultation with the medical provider. I think it's in Guatemala or somewhere, it's 2 minutes.
2 minutes?
2 minutes,
Okay.
on average.
It's
you
like,
have with...
There's no hi, there's no how are you. It's like, okay.
So how do you even get to communicate what's actually ailing you in 2 minutes, or even 16 minutes, right? And
it's ridiculous.
There's not too many physicians I've spent time with for more than 60 minutes. So I think, it's on the much lower end of the range in the US. So what we would do is, in the app or on the platform, or even just having them print out a piece of paper that would just translate into physician speak. Hey, your patient is experiencing, let's say, secondary hypogonadism, which is low testosterone, right? Because their testes are failing to create testosterone on their own anymore. And, based on their luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone being high, yes, the signal is already turned up, but, again, the testes aren't producing proper amounts of testosterone. So we recommend, testosterone replacement therapy, for, your patient, right? So then they can literally just hand it to their physician. And again, we're trying to optimize the body, not cure disease, right? And I've heard this, and this is almost like a universal experience for everyone, where somebody's not feeling well, they have low energy, they have brain fog, they don't feel like they used to, so they go to their physician and they're like, listen, I don't feel well. Okay, let's order some tests, right? And they order a very small battery test, very small, and whatever they test comes back. They return back to the physician, and then they're like, okay, doc, what's wrong with me? And they're like, nothing's wrong with you. What are you talking about? Like your labs are fine, right? They're like, no, I still feel like crap. No, you're fine.
I feel crap.
No, I still feel like crap. No, you're fine. And then it gets nowhere because, again, they're the expert, right? But again, they're trying to cure disease, right? Not go for optimal. So, there's that, difference, obviously, in how we interpret lab work versus how they interpret lab work. So, having that platform where somebody can just literally advocate for themselves, saying, here's what's actually, ailing me. And, we've had to do that with other physicians as well, where our patients are experiencing certain things, and we're like, hey, listen, here's what you need to tell your physician, because here's, what we see, and here's the reason why we see it. And, present this to your doctor. And they're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like, how did you not catch that? So, again, we look at it differently. And, if the system wasn't, quote unquote, however you want to call it, like imperfect or broken or whatever it is, then we wouldn't have the opportunity to do what we do anyway. So,
but I love your idea. I mean, it's I'm really. So do you feel that it's going to be official in 2025? You're going to launch?
Yeah, that's what I'm working on. Yeah, I'm trying to get it at least online, by the halfway mark, hopefully by June or July.
Okay. Summertime.
Yep, summertime.
I think that's an amazing idea. I would be your customer for sure.
Oh, awesome.
So
we want everyone, because again, we're offering services for free, right? And it just makes sense. Like, we always try to build that offer you can't refuse, right? What we call that mafia offer. It's like, hey, you can't refuse this, hey, because we give you just so much value, right? Where, it just makes sense for you to work with us.
That's amazing. So, Ben, where can if people want to reach out to you, where can they find you, and how they can reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. Our website is just number 4bpm.com, just like, 4bpm.com. And you can schedule a complimentary consultation service with us, just to say, hey, are you a good fit, first of all? Because again, if we can't help you, we'll tell you immediately. We're not the ones that, and again, this is against our philosophy. I know other, like clinics or whatever you want to call it, they just sell you a bunch of stuff. They're trying to sell. I'd rather tell you you don't need anything versus, trying to sell you, because if somebody else tells you, the actual truth, then hell, I'm going to lose you as a client. I want you as a client for life, whether, you're with us, consistently, or, we help you achieve your goal, and then you're good for a while, and then you drop off, and then you come back whenever, your life conditions change or your goals change. We want people to, be with us for a lifetime.
Yeah, I truly feel your true commitment to help people, and that's beautiful. Thanks for serving us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and again, it's amazing that I was able to, really connect with, my mission in life. It's funny. I was talking to another person that was going to Tony, and she has it where she's like, I can't get myself to do things. I'm like, well, maybe it might be time to kind of redefine, your purpose, right? And kind of look outside yourself, because she's already cleared her financial goals, right? She has passive income that will support her. Her kids are great, right? She's like, okay, well, maybe it's time to look outside yourself and to try to help other people, and add value that way, and find people.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I've been really blessed that way.
Thank you so much, Ben, for the conversation. Really appreciate your time today, and I'm looking forward to get your text message in summer, or to see your release of your new platform.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thank you so much for having me. Love to be able to share, what it is that we've gathered along the way, and to be able to to share with people, and hopefully make a positive impact on their health and wellness as well.
Good.